Welcome to Building from Scratch with Yewande. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Hi everyone, my name is Yewande Odmosu. Welcome to Building from Scratch. And today we're hosting Ada. Ada is a very, how will I describe her? Very resilient person from afar. And I don't know, I don't think I've met Ada in real life, but I think we've connected, and I can't remember how we connected. I think we connected on Twitter or social media or something. But just a brief introduction about Ada. Ada Oyom is the founder and executive director of Code Africa. Code Africa is a non-profit organization focused on empowering African women with technical skills. I think it was founded in 2016 and has impacted over 60,000 women across 20 countries through mentorship, training, and community building initiatives. She's also the founder of Open Source Africa. An open source community Africa, is aimed at fostering collaboration and open source contributions within the African tech community. Ada, thank you for joining us. Is there anything I missed in your headline intro?
No, I think that summarizes it as brief as it could be. Thank you very much, Yawande. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, and I know a few things about you that I did not introduce, but I guess during the course of the conversation, we'll touch on it. I think first thing is you go by Colocodes,
Yes.
which is a mouthful. My team says it means lady software developer, tech junkie, pro girl, child education, and women in tech advocates. Is that true? Or do you care to explain the full meaning?
Okay, yeah, I could do that, but I think they're right. Because I know that there was a time I uploaded an image that just explained it. Because I kept having people ask me what it means, but the origin of the name, so it's pronounced Colocodes, and the origin of the name is a female software engineer who is crazy with her ideas, like not limiting myself to, I would say, like the standards has been set or limits, basically like the glass ceiling, just thinking outside the box, basically. That's it. So Kolo, like what people call crazy in Nigerian parlance, but not crazy in that aspect. Just like crazy in innovations, crazy in going for daring things, just doing things that, on a normal day your fear would stop you. And then Codes, like the female software engineer.
Ah, nice. Codes. Oh, I get it now. I get it. Cool. So before we even go into like early days and everything, congratulations. You won the Eloy Awards in STEM. And I
Thank
think that was
you.
like a few days ago, and I'm so proud of you. How did it feel? Like, I know you've won many awards, but how did that feel?
I honestly was not expecting it. I'll be very honest, because some of the persons on the nominee list, I think one of them is even a member of our advisory board. So you can imagine being on the same list with someone who is almost like a mentor. So it felt really good. I mean, I'm asked for votes, but I still wasn't sure that I was going to like win it. So that felt really good. And I think that, getting that type of recognition at my age, that's a big deal for me.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and I'm so proud, so proud of you. Okay, let's do early days. So I know that, or I think I saw that you grew up in Nigeria. Where did you spend most of your early, like before uni days? Were you um, in Lagos, or did you grow up in the East? Where did you spend most before uni?
Okay, so I am a Lagos born and brought up baby girl. I was born and brought up in Lagos bred. I specifically in Agege, Lagos, and I like to outline that particular location because of the what's the word? I've forgotten the word right now, but because of the definition, sort of, that people try to like place you. when you grow up in that kind of area. But yes, I was born and brought up in Lagos. I'm a fully Lagos babe, but I had to go to the east to do my university, but primary, secondary education in Lagos State.
Okay, yeah, and obviously I read that you went to OSCA and you studied microbiology. What informed that? And then at what point did you feel like, oh, I don't think I'm going to do what I studied in school?
Okay, so I initially wanted to be a medical doctor. My mom is a nurse, and I all of my upbringing, I was involved in some of the health activities basically. And those days you're limited with options. So I just wanted to become a medical doctor. But then I didn't get medicine when I applied the first time. I had to write jam. Second time, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll go for like a lesser course. In this instance, microbiology. And then when I get into uni, I would switch into medicine and then just like continue my career path that way. But then I got into uni and just realized that the whole stress of writing jam, getting clearance into your first year, and just the entire Nigerian university experience was just so stressful for me to want to even try to switch into another course. I'm just going to, okay, you know what? Maybe my second plan would be I'll do my microbiology for my 4 years, and then after 4 years, I'll come out and then do like a master's in maybe something around medical lab or public health or something around health that will still take me back into a field that's similar to medicine. But yes, God had like other plans for me. But yes, that's how I got into University of Nigeria and Nsukka.
And at what point did you say, you know what, I don't think I'm going to practice exactly what I'm studying in school? What happened? How did you get, or what was the first diversion into, okay, there's something called communities, there's something called tech, there's something called developer communities?
Yes, that's a very beautiful question. And now that I think back, I just like realized that before tech, it just felt like I was just moving through the waters. I didn't have anything stable. So, I was just wading through it. First year, second year. It was in my second year. I was very active on Facebook. My Facebook was always raining. And when I say active, I don't mean like in a good way. Just like posting pictures here and there and just being active. But then I stumbled on a post by, I don't know if you know him now, Chimdi Aneke. He's currently at Meta, but he was the Google student lead back in uni, and they had this tech club, and they had an activity that would get them they had an activity basically to help map out the entire university, both in the Nsukka campus, which is the main campus, and then the Enugu campus, but they were looking for volunteers. So I decided to sign up. And then if you get selected, then you get to also join the club itself and then participate in other activities. At that point in time, I wasn't interested in anything tech. Yes, I had like some interest when it comes to like hardware engineering. I mean, I grew up in a family of boys alone. I'm the only girl, so I had some interest in hardware engineering and just like the tidbits, but it wasn't something I was looking to explore. Again, I was just going through the waters, right? At that point in time, my second year, I think I had gotten to the point where the average Nigerian student would see it as, oh, just get your degree and then go out there and do something. I think even in my second year, first semester, I had resumed that semester with the plans of launching like a business in school, a beauty business, in school, and just like make extra change. But then the whole tech club activity happened and I got selected. I didn't have a laptop, so I went there with my phone and I was kind of like very intimidated because I got there and realized that it was a lot of, in fact, almost like all the students from computer science, engineering, the computer science and engineering faculties were there. And I was just the only person who, if you ask, she'll tell you she's from microbiology. So I felt very intimidated. So I just stayed at the back, but I participated in it. And then I got selected. And then that single selection to participate as a volunteer just opened up new doors for me. But I think that at that point, I was just excited to be associated with something that had the brand name Google. That was just it. Because back then, I mean, if you are a student and you're volunteering for any big tech, activity, it's always a huge thing for you. So I was just happy that I had something to do with Google, and that was about it. But being a part of that club also exposed me to like the larger communities. Apparently, they also had a GDG, which is Google Developer Groups, community in UNN. So that was GDG UNN, but it was very inactive. Now, one of the community members who I surprisingly found out that he was from my hometown, and he played like a huge role, but maybe I might share that later on. At that point in time, he saw my interest and then, sent me some movies to watch. And one of the movies was one, I can't remember, I think it was The Intern, that talked about it, kind of like focused on two grown adults who were interning at Google. And that just like, made me more interested in wanting to do something with Google. I didn't know what it was, but I just wanted to do something with Google. So I saw that me being a part of that community as an opportunity to just key into that. And then, I started attending the club activities. And then from there, the outgoing leads for GDG UNN decided it was time to get new persons to lead the community. I think as of this time, I was like 6 months to 8 months into being a part of the community. Again, it wasn't something so huge for me. I was still doing my whole microbiology thing. I wasn't associating myself as a tech person. I was just being a part of this very fun club that had me associating with the brand name Google. But I decided to apply for it and I was selected. I was selected to lead the community, and I think that was what now put me at the forefront of every foundational activity of my career till date. So yeah.
Nice. That's actually interesting because I know we tell like younger people to use like social media for good and to join communities and to volunteer, but then it's always like, it's just normal like hype or vibe of okay, it doesn't work. So it's interesting that, you just being randomly on social media, seeing what someone else posted or was contributing and
Yeah.
going to volunteer, cause people say, oh, how do I switch to tech or how do I like, become XYZ. And I'm like, there are people constantly sharing, there are people constantly like talking about their work. And, people feel like, oh, I can't work for free or I can't volunteer. But there's so much that you can learn just by one, joining and then just by being visible. And I like that you said that somebody saw your interest and then, shared more things. Do you get? So it's not always like we're aspiring to perspire or stuff, but it's actually true. And it's interesting that you said that. So I want to ask a bit of question. So when you were volunteering in the, in the early days, what exactly were you doing? Because I always say like, I want this to be as practical as possible because people are like, oh, she just said she volunteered and she now became a Google developer representative. But what exactly, because you probably weren't like an engineer or a developer. So what were you doing? What did volunteering look like in those days in university?
Okay. So I also want to quickly state that I think that me starting out as a volunteer just helped me realize how much volunteering really helped my career. Like almost everything that I have done has been because of me putting myself out there as a volunteer and not waiting for the opportunities to come to me. But then to your question, what was I doing as a volunteer? That's a very, very important question. I need to like really think deep now. Okay. So I started out with being a part of the team that was mapping out the university campus. So we'd go to different locations, we'd take pictures, and try like map it out on Google Map. And that was interesting for me. But after that, after I got selected as a community lead for GDG UNN, remember I had mentioned that the community was quite inactive. So it was almost like I was building from scratch. And this was what helped me. In fact, this was what gave me like very foundational knowledge on how to build a community. And this was the first time. So if anybody ever asks me like, what's the first community I ever built, like first developer community, it would be GDG UNN. Right. So what I did was, thankfully the Google Developer Groups, programs team, they help out with resources to give you a guideline on how to build your community from scratch. But what I was doing was running events. I had a sit down with the outgoing lead. Okay, well, what are kind of events and activities? I'm somebody who has absolutely zero idea on how to organize a tech event. I don't have a technical background. The persons who are part of your community are people who are 3, 4, 5 years into this thing. They have like more experience than me, but they sat me down, talked me through it, organizing events, just a lot of event management, a lot of creating awareness about the program. And I sort of had an advantage because I was coming from a non-traditional background, which is microbiology. So it was easy for me to convince other persons in other faculties, because before I joined, a lot of persons who were part of these tech communities in my campus were from engineering and computer science. So it gave me headway to first of all, get more persons from other departments, other faculties, and then also get more women. But my volunteering was focused around event management, creating like a calendar. Okay, these are the events that we'll have in this semester. These are the events or activities that we'll have next semester. These are the venues that we'll need to work with. These are the number of persons that we need to get to attend our events. This is the budget that we need to work with. How do we raise money for this? So it was a lot around event management, but also sometimes it provided an opportunity for me to represent the community. So Google has this annual summit where they bring together their community organizers across different regions. So as of that time, I was representing the University of Nigeria and Nsukka, and that gave me an opportunity as an attendee representing my own community to interact with other persons from other community. And I think that I would like to add that the persons that I got exposed to, they have become like a very solid part of my network today. As of then, all of us were either just starting out or just 2 years into our career. So we're mostly like beginners or I would say like at the mid-level stage. I was at the beginner level stage. So yeah. So a lot of it was around event management, and just like creating awareness about the community, building from ground up.
Okay, great. And then, and thank you for like going into it, because then people have an idea of like basic things that you can even start with when it's volunteering. I think people always feel like, to volunteer, I must be an expert or I must be, skillful in this place. And then there's a lot of work that goes into like building communities, and everybody matters. So from that point to saying, okay, which one did you do first? Did you do OSCA or did you do Shikoda Africa? And what made you?
Okay, I did Shikoda Africa. I started Shikoda Africa first.
Okay.
I think OSCA was like 2 years into.
Okay, so Shikoda Africa. From that point to Shikoda Africa, what made you be like, you know what, I can start my own community? And why Shikoda Africa? I mean, I know that, there's a lot to be done for women, but why was it important for you at that time?
Yes. So, fun fact, I didn't start Shikoda Africa for it to be a community. It was solely meant to be a simple initiative where I would just write about the stories of women. And what prompted Shikoda Africa was, as of my final year, I was already now 2 years into the tech community. I had some familiarity. I had gained some grounds. I was also becoming better in building my software engineering skills. But I had realized that 2 years in, every time I had to organize events, I would struggle to get women. And in 2016, that was in my final year, we had this Women Tech Makers event. That was the first time it was going to be launching in the campus or in my community specifically. So it was meant to be just for women, and I struggled really hard to get women to attend the event. So as of then, I had already clicked that, okay, this is definitely not a simple issue. And also being a part of the Google Developer Groups community, I got to also learn about other chapters or other communities that were experiencing this. In fact, every single community, would always complain when they're giving the pros and the cons of their events. The cons would be, they had like a lesser number of women attending their events. So it had sort of already clicked in my mind that this was it wasn't just me facing this. Almost everyone was facing this. And then after coming out of uni, specifically, I left uni August 2016 after submitting my project and everything. In September 2016, this was on World Programmers Day, I saw a post, right? Okay, before I continue this, I also wanted to point out that I had mentioned earlier that part of what the GDG program does is that it brings, community leaders together every year. And I was exposed to these community leaders, meaning that I also saw women who were doing amazing, leading other GDG communities in their school. women like Moyi. I don't know how many people still know Moyi, but Moyi is amazing. Moyi literally crawled for so many of us to walk. Moyi, Lara, so many people, right? Okay, now fast forward back to September 2016. I noticed that on World Programmers Day, a company was celebrating programmers and they only used one woman. And that one woman was from Africa, right? And I tell myself, like, why is this happening? Because I know so many amazing women, but I've come to realize that they don't have that, or they didn't have that platform to talk about their story, to share their story. So I decided to, you know what, I'm going to go on my Medium account and start writing about these women that I know of. I wrote about many of them, in fact, all of them are doing amazing right now. If you go search on my Medium account, if you scroll back down to like 2016, you see these stories there. So I started writing about them, and that was how She Could Africa started. Again, it started as an initiative, but for every article that I would write, and I would always publish it on my Facebook, because again, I was very active on Facebook then. I would post it on Facebook, and then I would get comments, I would get feedback, I would get DM from people saying, oh, they want to connect with these women. It's now easy for them to see, or to see what success looks like, you know, with women in these roles, because they were not aware of these women. And after a point in time, women who were reading these stories were asking if we had a community where they can meet other women like themselves. And that was how She Could Africa started. Again, from an initiative to a small community, and then to where it is right now.
Oh, nice. Like, that's so cool. And I mean, you said, I think you're just finished university or you're in final year. So, I mean, obviously now you have an initiative, people are reaching out to you. And now I think you have, I don't know how many team members you have. So, knowing that you had limited funds, like, where did you start from? Like, what made you feel like, okay, you know what? From writing to like getting women together, you know, how did you like get your first, I don't know, volunteer or your first team member? You know, and I know that now it's easier to look back and say, oh, I did this and did that. But then with very limited funds, resources, what was like the first push for you to be able to say, okay, yes, I can get volunteers or I can get, you know, people on my team?
Okay, how we were able to get volunteers. So again, a lot of what I did from uni set the foundation for everything. So with the activities I was hosting back in school, I already had volunteers who were also sort of my friends as well. And after uni, I shared the idea with them. The first event that we organized at Chico Africa, it was funded by me and then a couple of other persons who I reached out to for donations. But I sort of already had like a volunteer structure set up of these individuals. And again, even when I was in uni, I would always post about my events, talking about the impact, and people wanted to be a part of it. So I would say that I already had some sort of track record of people seeing me organize this event and then wanting to also help out in the next time. So, as of when we started She Could Africa, it wasn't very difficult. In fact, I had to screen out a lot of volunteers out because we always get like a ton of applications when it comes to like volunteers. So for the volunteer part, it wasn't that difficult, doing that.
And at what point, you know, did it become, because I know that almost everybody that starts, you know, there's no formal or no structure or no like registration. At what point did you be like, were you like, okay, you know what, this is now like serious. I have to do paperwork and, you know, I have to get like, even if it's part-time people on the team, not just volunteers.
That was around, it took me quite a while. I think this was around, I'm trying to remember, because it wasn't so long ago. It was like 3 years ago, and 3 years was, I would say from 2021 or 2022. I'm not so sure, but around that period. And the reason why it took this long was, um, I literally started building She Could Africa when I started building my career. So sometimes I would let, SCA take the back seat because I mean, I needed to have a career. I needed people to know me for something beyond She Could Africa. And sometimes I wouldn't say I would let my career take the back seat, but I would just slow down a bit on what I was in my career and then start amplifying more about She Could Africa. So I kept doing that alternatively, and it didn't really allow me to see that there was a need for a team until the 2021-2022 season, where things got a lot more intense. We're getting more recognitions. We're getting more, the work that we were doing was just a lot for us to not continue running, or for us to keep running like we weren't so structured. So yes, it took that long.
Okay, we'll come back. We'll come back to this question, and I like that you gone into the direction
Okay.
of the next question. So there are a lot of like amazing people that have a career and build things. I'm one of those people. There are a couple of people there, like Dolak. We had Dolak from We Talk Sound, and he's been building that and also working as a product marketing manager. Now let's go a little bit direction in your career after school. Obviously you wanted to do more for your career. How did that look like? And obviously I'm fortunate to know that you worked at Google. How did that morph into, okay, you know what, I feel like I have a career now, and I know me personally, I know that you worked in tech. How did that transition come in like real life career, not just building She Could Africa?
Okay, that's a very beautiful question. So I would say that I'm the type of person who likes to be very structured. I like to have plans. When I say plan A to Z, I like to make sure that I have all of these plans. And 1 year into when I started tech in uni, being exposed to all these different individuals. I mean, I was exposed to people who were working at Google, program managers at Google. I was exposed to people who were doing like developer relations at Google, community management, all of these things, software engineering. I was exposed to all of them at a very early stage of my career. So I could see what success looks like for me in my, in tech, right? I had like different options, but then I realized that what I wanted to do was, software engineering, specifically backend for web. But I made a mistake where, and I think many people have made this mistake, which is why it's very easy for me to talk to, especially for undergraduates and fresh graduates. It's very easy for me to talk to this kind of persons. What I did was I had like one single plan. All right. My plan was to come out of uni, join a boot camp on software engineering. I don't want to call the company's name, but if you're present in tech community 2016, 2017, you probably know the company's name. But yes, join that and then, just set my career trajectory from that onward as a software engineer, and then maybe just do She Could Africa on the side here and there. But again, I feel like God had like other plans. I didn't get in, and I was very depressive. It was a life-changing moment for me, but fortunately enough, I got into another boot camp. But halfway into the bootcamp, that was when I realized that I didn't even, want to do software engineering full time. It felt boring, combined with the skills that I had from university with community management and tidbits of program management. I started exploring like other options, right? I'm sorry. I think I'm going off track your question. Please
No,
remind me your
you are.
question.
Please go on. No. This is like we always want to have like the raw details. So please go on. This is actually part of what we want to know. We don't want the glossy, successful. Oh, I just did
Okay,
it. I
but
had
could you
an
please remind me the
interview.
question?
So the question is just like your career, like in real life, knowing that you had a career, but knowing that you didn't study tech. How did you get from like your early career days into like having a tech career?
Oh, okay. So to pick up from where I stopped, I started exploring like other options that would help me combine my technical background and then the community development, program management, project management. So at that point in time, I was trying out different options. And I think when I was quite active on TikTok, I made a video talking about like some of the fields that I had, tried out just because I was looking for one particular role that I wanted to be good at. But what I knew at the back of my head was when people talk about the name Ada Nduka Oyom, what do I want them to think about? That's one thing that I'm always thinking about, right? At every point in time, because at different points in time, I have rebranded myself over and over again career-wise. But at every point in time, I'm always asking myself that question. And at that point in time, it felt like people didn't really know me for something, right? I was just here and there. And then there was She Could Africa. So I decided to focus on developer relations, which was a role that could help me combine all of these different skills that I had. And then I started building my career in developer relations. And over the course of time, I mean, for somebody who is coming from a non-traditional background, you many times feel that guilt to want to be over prepared or to be really good. And I would admit that I'm a perfectionist, right? So that has helped me like double down, making sure that the work that I do, the quality of work that I do is really top notch. So from there, I started getting roles in community management, developer relations, different companies here and there up until I got like an engagement at Google. So yeah, that's literally it for me.
Nice. Thank you for the summary. And so you were working, and it's intense to already do developer relations as a career, and then still run like two communities. And we'll come to Oscar in a bit. For you, even though both on and off work activities were similar, I can bet that it was super challenging. For you, what were the biggest challenges and how did you navigate? I know one of it is obviously time and resources, money and structure. But what other challenges did you have, like with your day job, being Ada, developer relations, and also Ada Shikora Africa?
Well, challenges. I would say that for challenges at the very early stage or at the onset of my career, it didn't look like challenges, right? Because again, at that point in time, She Could Africa was taking the back seat. So it would only be maybe when I had the opportunity and time to write about a story. As of then, it was still like a story. And this was around 2016 to like 2018, that timeline. So it was only a story, so it didn't really affect. But up until I got into InterSwitch and, things got like really intense, I was leading developer relations from scratch. I was literally pioneering the entire unit and it was very intense. But I think that for me, what helped me was I was able to tie a lot of similarities with what I was doing at She Could Africa and what my 9 to 5 looked like, which was community building, right? So, She Could Africa provided me like a platform to test out new things, just like a lot of trial and error. And then whatever was working, whatever strategy was working, I could implement it in my 9 to 5. Right. So excuse me, I'm the type of person who at that point in time, I wasn't trying to see it as challenges. I just saw it as an opportunity to build faster, to learn faster and to grow better. But I would say like the main challenges started, maybe when it was 4 years into She Could Africa and, now we were gaining momentum. People were really looking up to us to help more girls get into tech. Things were getting a lot more serious than I thought it was. And that was when I said start getting like volunteers. But in my career side of things, the main issues as at that point was, sometimes trying to like combine speaking engagements. I had like multiple I still have, but I had like multiple speaking engagements. And for someone who wasn't used to that, yes, I had experience back in uni. I had experience in public speaking. I had experience in my previous roles. But again, now I was trying to combine it with something that was now growing into an organization, but it wasn't set on an organization structure yet. And then like a 9 to 5. So that was like the main, yeah, I think you kind of like summarized it, which is time management and also like resource management. But maybe we can talk about the resource management part later.
Okay, cool. I have a fun question that I always ask people. So, when you start something, obviously you don't know half of what you're doing, and then there's always this early inflection point where you really don't know how it's going to go, or you really didn't expect something big to happen, and then it happens, and you're like, okay, now what I'm doing seems serious. For you, did you have like that early inflection point at She Could Africa where you're like, oh my god, I didn't even think we'll get to this point, or oh my god, this is like beyond what I even expected, and that just gave you more confidence?
Yes, I had an inflection point, but it wasn't an early one. When I had that, or when I got to that point of realization, it was at our first summit in 2022. First SEA summit. And this is because a lot of the activities that we did back then, were mostly remote or virtual. Yes, we had women joining in from like different countries. The numbers were there, but I couldn't really see the impact. I couldn't really feel the impact to the core. So at that point where reality literally hit me like, okay, this thing we're doing is really bigger than me. Yes, I would hear people tell me, oh, you don't know what, She Good Africa is doing out there. People would always recommend, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't feel it until we had our first summit. And this was because we had like the entire hall filled up. And people were literally coming up to me, walking up to me to tell me how She Good Africa had changed their lives. We had success stories of women who had gotten jobs at Microsoft, Google before the summit. Again, it still didn't feel like this was a success that I could attribute to our hard work. Because it was just like out there. I couldn't really like touch it. But the summit really changed my whole perspective about what we're doing. That was in 2022.
Yeah, I
Yes.
remember that summit. Yeah, it was really successful. And the reverse of that question is, so was there a point, early or late, where, I mean, most entrepreneurs, community builders, people that just take this kind of risk, they feel like, oh my God, I think I'm going to shut this thing down. I don't think I know what I'm doing. Did you have that at one point where you thought, okay, everything is going wrong, I think I'm done?
Oh my God, yes. I don't think that this is a feeling that ever dies. I've had it so many times. In fact, this year I've had it so many times. Um, yes, I've had the feeling like so many times, but I think this is where the definition I had given about my name, this is where like it takes place a lot. I'm not someone to give up easily, right? So if I start something, I like to see it to the very end. So every time reality would hit me with like maybe a huge challenge, especially around funding, there are ideas, but we're not able to like fund it, or we are halfway into funding it and then like money has like finished, but we still have to keep going. This reality would hit me. But what always helped me was I would tell myself, I started this thing. I might as well see it to the end. And what's the worst that could happen? It would either go well or it would go wrong. But I'm not giving up. And I think that the success stories that we're also getting, while we're doing the work, it was very difficult. It was very hard. It was very frustrating. Or it was always frustrating. But the success story kept us going. Right. So again, the 2022 summit changed things a lot, and I've held on to that feeling ever since then. But yes, like there's so many times, even like I said, even this year, there's so many times this year that I felt like, why am I doing this? Like, who sends me message? I just want to help more girls get into tech, but this is way more than what I signed up for.
Yeah, I think that answer you gave is what almost everybody that's come on the podcast has said. Like, the feeling never goes away. You just find ways to like overcome it every time it comes. So, how many team members do you have? And for you, your first few hires, how were you able to convince them? And what were you looking out for? Especially when there was possibly limited funds.
Okay.
I feel like you're saying like the hardest parts, people.
Okay.
I feel like after funding, people are the hardest part of building anything. And I think
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. So I would say that how I feel around hiring, I've been very fortunate to be blessed with some of the best hands, right? And I'm a very prayerful Christian. I'm going to put this out there. And everything that I've been doing with She Good Africa, especially people who follow me like on Instagram, I'm always talking about how there are so many people who are doing a lot of similar things to what I'm doing at She Good Africa. There's nothing different. The only thing is just like God's grace, right? Now, when we started, setting up a team, I would start with the volunteer side of things. When we set up we used to call them core team. When we set up a core team, people already had interest. People wanted to join what we're doing at She Good Africa. And the selling factor was always beyond just helping other girls. It was an opportunity to build your career, right? If you wanted to become like a program manager, we had like a program manager. I will use that program manager as an example. We had a program manager role. I always talk about how volunteering, I mean, I've also shared on this podcast, I also talk about how volunteering helped set like the foundation of my career. So I use that as an example. And so many persons have gone through She Good Africa using as a foundation and then moved on to something even bigger. especially volunteers. So when we started setting up like a volunteer core team, that was the selling factor. The ladies wanted to help more girls get into tech like them. They also wanted to get an opportunity to build their career. But when we started setting up our full-time team, the full-time team, we're just 2 years in. So this is 2024. We started setting up in 2022. And when we started that, I knew that, once you put money on the table, anybody would want to work for your team as long as you're paying them. So I had to be extra careful. And what I did first, and I'm always going to say it, I had to say I had to pray. Right. I am very specific to the type of persons who get to work on my team. Because again, like I said, once you put money on the table, it is easy for anybody to convince you that they are the best person. And at that point in time, it was beyond, what I was looking for was beyond just your skill sets. Again, if I can afford to pay a certain amount of person or a certain amount of salary, I can definitely have like multiple candidates. So I was looking beyond skill sets. We're looking at other things. I don't want to go into like the HR part of things, but we're looking
No,
at other things.
you can highlight. No, you can. That's actually. So I'm always
Okay.
curious about like other things that people look at. So for example, but I won't tell you the answers. When you finish out, I'm also comparing like what other people have said, was important outside like the things that you said. So please feel free to go into it.
Okay, so the things that I was prioritizing aside from the core skill sets were, interest in wanting to like help other girls, interest in no, I'm not interest, team capabilities, because as a small team, it was very important to me that I know people say how HR is saying that company is calling it a family. We didn't do that, but it was very important to me that everybody felt comfortable and they saw an opportunity for growth in their role. So these are like major things that I was prioritizing beyond just the pay or beyond just their core skill sets. And thankfully, we got the first set of full-time hires for SCA. Now, when we had our first retreat, I didn't see it as that up until when we had our first retreat. So we have like an annual offsite, and during that, someone started a conversation of like, what's your She Got Africa story, how you joined SCA, and everyone was sharing their story. I was just like in the background listening, and everyone was sharing their story as to how it almost felt like a divine orchestration to how they joined She Got Africa. And that was how I knew that, okay, this was, beyond me. And from that till date, we've also continued to grow the team. But every time it's time to like hire a new set of employees, I'm always very specific on beyond your skills. Because when you come to She Got Africa, there's a lot of work. Anyone who has been at She Got Africa will attest to you that one thing that we always prioritize is quality, the quality of work that we do. Yes, the women are not paying for it. Yes, it's a non-profit, but we are not going to compromise on the standard of work that we put out there. So if you come into SCA, you know that there's an opportunity for growth for you, and you should be able to show that you're growing in your role. So yeah.
Okay, nice. That's quite interesting. And how many team members do you have now?
So we have over a dozen at the moment.
Oh wow. Oh wow. So over a dozen, and you've reached like over 60,000 women. That's interesting. Fun fact, there's a mentorship thing that I do, and I reached out to Ada, and her team members like showed up and helped for women. So thank you. I'm using this opportunity to say thank you publicly for like supporting us as well. I think that you being able to support women directly and also support other organizations that mentor and help women is like a really big deal. So thank you. I want to switch a little bit. So you already run like a really big community, and then you decided that you're a superwoman and you wanted to do another one. How did OSCA come about? OSCA is open source community Africa. Like, what made you think I've not had enough of community, I need more?
Okay. And maybe another fun fact, but when I say SCA and OSCA, I was in that era of just coming up with new things. I think it wasn't up until like a couple of years back that I had to like slow down and just focusing on a few things. But yes, OSCA, I co-founded OSCA with Samson Godi, who is an amazing expert when it comes to open source. And how that happened was, so Samson has always been someone who has been heavily invested in open source, in driving open source adoption globally. He's been involved with different open source programs across Google, Linux, etc. And we were friends. So every time we'd catch up, he would always talk about his escapades, all the amazing things he's doing with open source, all the recognitions he's getting, the career opportunities it was bringing to him. And I was doing something, or rather, I had this community experience. I knew how to be the community at this point in time. I had a couple of successful communities on my list. And I told him, how about we bring something like this down to Africa? Because as of then, open source wasn't so popular as a concept, right? We didn't have so many Africans, Nigerians who were into open source. The adoption was very low when it came down to especially sub-Saharan Africa, this continent. And I said, okay, you know what? You bring your expertise in open source. I bring my expertise in community building, program management, all of that. We combine it together and we could start a community for open source developers. Now, the goal was for it to be a platform where we would not only create more awareness on open source, we would also be able to drive adoption and build, the number of credible contributors and developers from the African open source space. And literally, that was how it started. It just started as a random idea. The same way She Good Africa started as a random idea was the same way OSCA started as a random idea. From there, it's spilled into organizing our first event, talking all about it. What really helped us was 2016 to like 2019 was a very intense period in a good way for the African tech ecosystem. There was a lot of new communities springing up. People were really excited about, community tech, just driving a lot of adoption when it comes to the ecosystem. So the growth of our community really keyed into that. And that was how OSCA got to where it is, that was how OSCA got to where it is. And then a couple of years down in 2020, we decided to do something different. At this point in time, we were already exposed to different conferences. Again, the goal, both for She Good Africa and for OSCA, was we already saw what success for similar communities, organizations like this outside of Africa looked like. We saw the standards they had set. So for OSCA, we saw conferences outside of Africa that were doing something huge for open source in Europe, in North America, all of these different conferences. And then we said we wanted to do something, wanted to bring that standard down to Africa. So instead of Africans flying outside of the continent to go speak at those events, to go attend those events, how about we do our own down here? Obviously we start with Nigeria because that's where we're based in. But how about we do our own down here? And we start bringing those speakers, those companies to come sponsor, to come speak at events, right? And that was how OSCA Fest, which is what many people know OSCA for. That was how OSCA Fest started. But before we did this, we traveled out to Open Source Summit Europe and we participated in the event. We spoke with the organizers. Okay, teach us how you do your XYZ. What are the things that we need to focus on? What are the things that we need to do? And then we decided to bring that back in 2020, just before COVID started. As in February 2020, we organized the first Open Source Community Africa Festival. And that literally set the standard for every other thing. We had a lot of interest. We had companies like Meta, as of then it was Facebook, I think. We had Meta, we had Google, we had Linux. We had so many of them come down, not just to speak, but also to participate. And that boosted our confidence that, these people have been looking for an opportunity to break into the African open source space, but there wasn't that platform. So it let us know that, again, just like how She Good Africa Summit gave me that reality that, this thing that I'm doing is something huge. That was how OSCA Fest gave us that reality that this thing, people have actually been waiting for it for so long, but there wasn't an opportunity for us to do that. Yeah, that's literally it.
Nice and well done. I have another random question. So I'm going back to She Good Africa. So I know that a lot of people reach out and speak about how hard it is to start and run a non-profit organization, especially in Nigeria, start from Nigeria. And based on how successful She Good Africa is, I believe that, you probably have navigated, the early days of running a non-profit, registering, and then growing it. For you, what was that experience like? And what would you advise anybody that wants to run a non-profit for communities like this, especially in tech?
Okay, so the legal side of things, I would say that the need didn't arise for it up until COVID, and that was because we're trying to like expand. But my advice would always be, for persons to like take this very serious. And we were actually lucky that we had to do that because right after COVID, so from 2021, we started applying for a lot more, we started applying for funding from international organizations. We didn't want to depend on donations again, and many of them required that. So for anyone who's trying to do something similar, whether, as long as you know that you want this thing to turn into an organization, start with your registration. Like that's the main thing. There are some other things, like maybe for example, setting up a board. It might not be immediately, but if you consult with like your legal team, they would give you a guideline on the things that you need to prioritize. I would say that on my end, beyond just the registration, the other things, it almost felt like I had to be pushed to do them because again, as of then, I would say that I was alternating. Like I said, I was alternating both my career and running She Could Africa. So up until it became a problem, I didn't really see it as a need. And I wouldn't advise anybody to do that, So yeah.
So your advice is get a really good legal team and then, roadmap.
Well, not everyone can afford
Exactly.
legal
That's what I was
team, but
going
just
to say.
like get like legal advice. But
Okay,
the
get
first
legal
thing
advice.
is, setting up that registration and making sure, because every type of funding that you want to apply for, except donations from individuals, many of them would ask you for that proof of registration. And some of them would give you a certain duration that you have to have been registered for. So the earlier, the better.
Okay, okay. All right, cool. And if anyone has questions, you can feel free to like request or type or reply. I'm going to do the last set of questions now. But if you have questions for Ada, for myself, just let me know. So I'm going to do like a bit of fun questions. But before the fun question, I have one more serious question to ask you.
Okay.
So don't be afraid. So I mean, I'm just imagining that, helping a lot of women, whether directly or indirectly, what are some like interesting stories that really, really like surprised you from people that have gone through She Could Africa?
Interesting stories.
Yeah, or interesting feedback that,
Okay. Although all of them have been focused, or rather, yeah, all of them have been focused on one major theme, which is around career progression or career growth, but in different ways. I would say, for example, one, and this is like my favorite success story.
okay.
It's Ruth Ikega. Some of
Okay.
you might know her. Ruth is also my friend, but when she started with She Could Africa, um, it was after I spoke at an event in her school. She was still in school at this time. I spoke at an event. She was also studying microbiology, and seeing me at where I was spurred her to get into tech. So she became a part of our academy program. It was our mentorship program at that point in time, but now we've rebranded into our academy program. And then she also joined one of our open source programs as well, still at SCA. And from there, she started her journey in open source, right? That provided her like a platform to start building a solid career in open source. A year later, she became a GitHub star, being the first Nigerian GitHub star or African GitHub star. I can't remember, but first female Nigerian or African GitHub star. And that was a huge moment for me because I could literally see this person was close to me. I could see their career progressing, and I'm still seeing it progress, all because of, being a part of our program. And, from there now she's doing something amazing with GitHub. Another success story that I really like and I really take to heart is that of Precious Kolawole. And she was also a part of our mentorship program, which is now the academy program. And then after graduating from that, a year later, she got a scholarship, full ride scholarship to Canada, a school in Canada. She's an undergraduate student there. She's also working at Shopify now. And I think that she's also been able to get like multiple scholarships even from Google as well. But again, the foundation was being a part of our training program or academy program at She Could Africa. Those are like my two major, I mean, there's so many, but those are like my two favorites. If anybody asks me like of success stories. So yeah.
All right, thank you. And so you're doing a lot, working, building communities. Personally, how do you like manage, all the madness and all the high pressure and all the intensity? Just as an individual, and this is just tips for anyone that feels like, okay, Ada is doing it, it's hard. How does she manage it? The ones you can share publicly.
Okay, yes, it's very hard. I'd say that. Okay, how do I answer this? Okay, I'm someone who is very. I had said it earlier. I'm very structured. I feel very organized as well. Right. If I'm going to be doing this at 6 p.m., for example, I know that 6 p.m. I'm going to focus on this. But I want to also say that over the course of years, I've also realized that, what worked for me might not work for someone else. Um, and I think this is something that I realized, I would say like last year when I started having like full-time employees. Right. And I would always give this feedback, try to like help them get better. But then I realized that, even if they're trying to use my templates, it might not really work out for them because their personality and my personality differs a whole lot. Right. So what I would just say is understand what season you are, what phase in your life you are. Again, I had said earlier that at some point I was prioritizing Chicoed Africa. At some point I was prioritizing my other career, my 9 to 5. At some point I was prioritizing content creation. For example, there was a time you only asked me, why am I no longer doing my TikTok videos? People have come to like ask me, and I've just realized that.
I was going to ask you, but continue. That was my next question. But I will still ask you, but continue.
Yeah. But I just realized that there are different phases, in life, and just understanding what phase you need to be prioritizing at that moment. That's what has always helped me. And when it also comes to like rebranding as well, the same thing. But when it comes to time management, even if I'm trying to say, for example, I'm in the phase where I'm trying to focus on Chicoed Africa. Okay, what are things that I need to do when it comes to Chicoed Africa for that year? What's my goal? What's my vision for that year for Chicoed Africa? What are things that I need to do? How do I achieve it? One quarter, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. What are things that I need to do? And then I break it down into smaller things. And that's how I'm able to really like streamline. Okay, in Q1, say for example, we want to be able to reach 1,000 women. We have 2 programs I want to reach, use to reach 1,000 women. I know that my priority is going to be focusing on those 2 programs, which means that I might not be available, for example, speaking engagements, for travel opportunities. I have already helped streamline those things. And I know that because I'm not always going to be on the road, maybe I have time to also do tidbits of maybe here, content creation here and there, tidbits of speaking engagements here and there that are virtual. All of these little things, it might look very little, but those are things that have been able to help me. And another thing that I'm not going to deny, if you have the money, get like an assistant who is really, really good at their job. That's what has been also very helpful in what I'm doing right now. Having someone that I can rely on to be able to like take some, admin tasks, maybe do like some research, things that I don't have to like focus on, like those manual tasks or those tiny tasks that I don't have to focus on. I'm able to like, start prioritizing the bigger things. So, yeah.
Okay, great. And thank God you touched on your TikTok. So you were doing TikTok for some time. Don't laugh, because I was going to ask you. And so why do you stop? And when are you coming back on TikTok? And when are you going to do videos again?
Oh my God. Okay. So allow me to maybe just share a little bit about personal branding. Can I do
Please. Of course, that's why you're here.
that?
Please tell us.
So, over, it's been 10 years. Oh, wow. 10. Wow. Okay. 10 years into building a tech career, and I have rebranded so many times, right? As of 2021-ish, I realized that when people talk about my name, what they think of when they talk about my name is TikTok videos. And I didn't want that anymore, right? Yes, coming up with my funny TikTok videos, it was fun. It was a way to distress. And I was also getting popularity. I was getting accolades, all of that. It was also helping me get popularity for the projects that I was working on. But I realized that for example, if I Google myself, I will see my TikTok videos, and I didn't want that because I knew where I was headed to, right? I knew that, in the long run, I wanted to do She Could Africa full time. Thankfully, I'm doing that now, but I didn't want something like that. When people say, oh, maybe, have you heard about Ada from She Could Africa? And they Google my name and they're seeing my TikTok videos, nobody's going to take me serious, right? So I started to rebrand myself, and I would also be honest, doing this whole thing full time, I've just not had that much time to be on TikTok anymore. But a large part of it was around rebranding. I wanted to start putting out more content that focused on what I wanted people to associate my name with. So when you hear the name Ada Nduka Oyom, you hear about She Could Africa, you hear about Open Source Community Africa, you hear about non-profit leadership, you hear about gender equality, advocacy and things like that, and not just like a random TikTok. So rebranding over and over again, that was what happened to my TikTok. But yeah, like personal branding is also something that's very vital if you're trying to keep up to date with your tech career.
I totally understand and I totally agree. Totally. There was a time, like, I don't know, when I was trying out spaces just for fun and I was like super popular. But then I was like, I don't want people to remember spaces just for fun. Like, I can actually use it for something greater that I've been thinking about. And to be honest, that's how this experiment of doing this podcast on spaces was, because I was like, you know what? When people remember spaces, yes, they remember the fun times, but then down the line, I wanted them to be able to like think of something more productive. So I totally get, and I hope you still do TikTok in future. Maybe we'll give you another name so that you can be like,
I'm still
yeah,
doing it, but I'm just not sharing it on
yeah,
like the bigger
yeah,
platforms where I'm
yeah.
on.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you, man. This has been so. I don't think I've talked to you this long and this deep. So thank you for just gracing us with your time. I admire like all the work you do, especially for women. I feel like She Could Africa is one of the biggest communities, and I'm big on community. I also think that OSCA is a really important community, especially when in the ecosystem, in the African ecosystem, even outside tech, people talk about talent development, people talk about, talent scarcity, but then there's just very few people doing amazing work to like build that pipeline, of the teams that will actually build, amazing organizations. So thank you for all the work you've done. I sometimes ask if there's any question you thought I would ask you that I didn't ask you, and what that question would have been.
No, I don't think I have. Thank you.
Okay, okay.
I think there are a couple of questions in the.
Thank you. If you can't see it, Ada, you can go ahead and read it and ask it.
Oh, okay. So the
Oh,
one that's interesting is from Toluwanimi. He's saying, you once mentioned that you started She Could Africa by bootstrapping and then tapped into funding. What were some of the corporate funding that you got, and what were the strategies that allowed you attract funding? Which is a very good question. The first corporate funding that we got was based off of a rant that I had shared on Twitter. I'm pro building in public. I always talk about everything I'm doing. I think it's one of the reasons why people have been able to associate my success with what I do at She Could Africa. If I'm doing A, I'm talking about A, and I'm talking about the impact of A. If I have a challenge with A, I'm talking about the impact on that. I'm talking about the impact of that challenge on what I'm building. And I had made like a random rant on how, people want to associate with our community, but when it comes to helping out with funding it, with, associating with the success and building part, nobody wants to do that, but they want to key into within our community. And someone from a company reached out, a founder of the company reached out to me. Okay, how can we help? And that was how we got our first, funding. But it goes beyond just talking about it on social media. You also need to have the strategies. And one of the strategies that has helped is, if you're looking for funding, what are the initiatives, what are the programs, what are the activities that funding is going to go into? Because yes, you might get them at your door to say, okay, how can we help? What can we fund? What are you looking for money for? Or you might get grant opportunities that you want to apply for, but you need to have those programs, those activities, those project activities and ideas already in the pipeline. Right. So in this instance, I'm always coming up with random ideas. I'm always coming up with new projects, new activities that we can work on. And this is based off of what I have seen in our community. So community, feedback is always a huge thing. Community feedback for you might look like your beneficiaries. It might not be an actual community. It could be maybe say for example, you're trying to reach persons in Makoko. It could be them telling you this is what they want in Makoko, and then you can see how it aligns with your organization goals, right? But having those project ideas lined up for when funding comes, basically you staying ready for you to yes, stay ready so that you don't have to get ready. And then another thing is showing transparency. If you don't have a track record, again, this person would not have reached out to me if they didn't know that, I had a track record of, putting out success when it comes to the ideas and projects that I'm working on. So you need to have a track record, which is when building in public. You can't be building anything, whether a non-profit or a for-profit, and not talk about it on your platforms. You can't be I'm a reserved person, I'm not a social media person in this age and time, and expect that, it will go smoothly, or at least networking, that helps. But basically finding like a platform or a medium where you're able to share more about what you're doing. The easiest way to do that is via social media. And that way you're able to get more referrals, more opportunities. I know someone who has made, as an individual, she's made like one of the largest donations to us as an organization just because of what she's seen us, do as an organization from social media, right? So a lot of times you have to keep talking about it. If you did a program to train 100 people, how many persons from that 100 people were able to how many persons from that 100 people were able to graduate? Where those 100 people, where are they from? What's the demographic like? Are you targeting any person who is from an underserved community? An underserved community could be maybe people who are like orphans, people who cannot afford things. You're just like spotlighting like the different type of data. And then how many persons after that program have gone ahead to, maybe become something big. I always use Tunde Onakari of Chess and Slum as a very good example. If he was not talking about what he was doing with Chess and Slum on social media, not many people will know about not many people will know about Chess and Slum, and not many opportunities will come from it. So for you to get like funding opportunities without applying, you need to be able to put it out there, talk about your impact. It might not look like people are seeing it, but trust me, people are. And that track record will always be there for people to point back at that, you've been doing this from start. You're not just somebody who's just starting out. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if you have any other questions. I mean, there's a more personal question from MM. I don't know if you want to take it. She says, or he or she says, my question is, how do I keep my spirits high even when I get lowly motivated, especially when I get overwhelmed with coding?
Oh yeah, I could respond to that. For me, what always works is taking breaks. It could be short-term breaks or long-term breaks. And then even before you take a break, figuring out if you're actually burnt out or you're just in a block zone where there's no creativity coming up from you. But breaks are always very recommended. But then I think that you could DM me and then we could continue the conversation. I'll just like share more steps on that.
But yeah, thank you, Ada. Thank you so much. I hope that, when we clean this up and upload it, and in future you look back, it's also part of like your assets of storytelling. Looking forward to all the amazing things that you will do, even outside She Code Africa and OSCA. And, if anybody wants to reach out to Ada, you can message her. She's an amazing person, really hardworking. And thank you to everyone that also stayed this long. Thank you for everyone that listens, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you once again. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye. Thank you for listening to Building from Scratch. We hope you follow us and subscribe, and watch out for our next episode.